There we go. Good day and welcome to Small Biz Ave Live. Our session today is titled Getting Found More Often. In a moment, I will introduce you to your session moderator. Please use our session's Q&A to ask questions. I will review questions and direct them to our moderator, but please be aware our audience size might mean that your specific question will not be answered. But please join our Alignable small business groups at the end of the session to continue the dialogue. Links to these groups will be provided in the chat at the end of the session and are also posted on our agenda at smallbizaid.org, linked here in chat. It is now my pleasure to introduce you to Mike Blumenthal.
Hi, I get to be the moderator today. I've been involved in local for a very long time. It actually got started when I had to close a family business after 65 years. A very difficult experience, but we got our asses kicked by Amazon, mail order, B&H, Walmart, Kmart, Staples, and everybody else. Which led me into the internet, where I've had run 6 or 7 businesses, all revolving around local in one form or another. In that, I've met a number of the panel's participants that are here today. Not with us yet, but hopefully joining us is Brian Griffiths. I will introduce him first so that if he joins us, you'll know who he is. He's a digital marketer who focuses on helping staid and unadventurous industries rise above the crowd. He has 23 years experience as a marketer, graphic designer, and web designer, and his company, Be Strong Marketing, founded in 2010, builds custom sales funnels to create a system he calls predictable engine growth. Bill Slovsky, who I've known for a very long time. Bill and I used to go back and forth about local 2007, 2008, when I first started writing my blog. He's from Southern California, right on the San Andreas Fault, so while I hope he survives, I am in doubt. If the fault is going to get him, it's a fire. He has a degree in both English and law, of all things. That led him to the field of SEO, surprisingly. He has worked in-house as an SEO and for SEO agencies since 1966. He's been blogging about search patterns and papers since 2015, but I can tell you that his SEO by the Sea has been a leading voice in search and local search for many years beyond that. A factoid about Bill is he's, like I just said, he's been blogging since the mid-2000s. He and I have had many sort of conversations back and forth about how local works. Brian, I wanted to welcome you. I've already introduced you, so folks know who you are. Ben, would you just tell people how to get a hold of you if outside of this section?
Outside of here?
Want to?
Yeah, of course.
Hang on one second. Let me go back to Brian real quick and ask him that because he's here. Brian, would you tell folks where they can find you outside of this session if they want to get in touch?
Well, my website is bestrongmarketing.com, which is the letter B, and then strongmarketing.com.
All right. And Bill, where can folks find you if they're looking for you?
It's usually easiest to find me on one of my blogs, SEO by the Sea. I'm in the Go Fish Digital Marketing blog, and I spend a lot of time on Twitter, Bill_Slovsky.
Sounds good. So Ben, I got to know Ben because he is a Google My Business product expert. He's been working in SEO and social since 1994. He's the co-founder of Steady Demand, which works with agencies and businesses maximizing both local SEO and social media. Factoid about Ben, he's the only marketer in the world that was able to make money with Google Plus. And a second factoid about Ben is that he is probably the world's expert on getting Google My Business suspended businesses back into Google Maps. So with that, I want to jump in today's session, which is getting found more often. The number of ways that consumers can find you and find out about you are legion. And the question is, are you in all the places that you need to be? And the topic that were given to me, we're talking about maximizing Google My Business, how to optimize improve your SEO for your website, leveraging social media to get discovered. And what I wanted to dive into with each of you is really the question of how does a business know where do businesses leads come from based on what kind of business they are. I think one of the problems in a lot of these conversations is you're told blanket information, you got to be in social, you got to be in local, but you really as a business have to decide that. And then depending on which business you're in, which things should you focus on? And how do you measure success in that focus? So anyways, to kick it off, Brian, why don't you tell us how you would propose using social media to get discovered and what kind of businesses it's appropriate for?
Well, first of all, I very much believe in the concept of, one, knowing who your avatar is first. A lot of businesses.
When you say avatar, could you define that, please?
Sure. An avatar it's what's also referred to as your ideal customer profile. Some people will take that down to just a quick description of demographics. I personally use much more involved worksheet that not only talks about the demographics of who I'm trying to reach, but also things like their key purchase drivers and their wants and aspirations. By knowing that, I have more of a sense of where these types of people are going to be hanging out online and how to message them. So what I would do is probably first is create something that actually describes who your ideal customer is and where they hang out online, and then use that to find the appropriate social media, because obviously some social media is not going to be appropriate for your business.
So my profile would be groovy 70-year-old that likes to ride mountain bikes.
Yeah, and I'm sure you're on TikTok every single day doing
absolutely. That's my niche. Cool.
Yeah, but this is one of the most important things you need to know. So it's like knowing this stuff will help you find where you're trying to get to and where you're trying to find people. I mean, Facebook is great because Facebook has a niche where Facebook's so big that almost everybody's on it in some capacity, but sometimes you might find it better for things like LinkedIn. I mean, personally, I get a lot of my leads off of Alignable itself, because a lot of the businesses that I work with happen to be small business owners, not corporate pyramid climbers. So it's actually easier for me to find. So that's how I personally do, because I know my ideal customer is more likely to be on.
So identify your ideal customer and then understand where they're at, is which social media they might be on. So let me take this question to you, Bill, which is, how would you use your website to find new customers nationally or locally? There you go. I thought you were muted, but you're not.
I just wasn't speaking. Okay.
That would explain a lot.
So one of the most important things to set up your website to be found by your customers is to know who your customers are, what language they expect to find on your website, which words they'll use to search for what service you provide. One of the things I see a lot of businesses missing is, I use Google Maps a lot to find businesses, to go to places. And sometimes when I'm using it as a navigational device, I'll get down the middle of a highway and I'll get a message from my phone saying, "You have arrived." And I'm driving 50 miles an hour down the road. I haven't arrived. So there is a way to check and make sure that Google Maps gets you to a location. And if it fails, there's a way to report directly to Google saying, "Hey, something's wrong with this. It's broken. It's not getting me to the business I was trying to get to." And I would recommend that anybody relying on Google Maps to get business to their location, to get people location, to make sure they check, make sure Google Maps does that. And if it doesn't, search on Google to find how to make sure Google Maps works correctly for you.
So that sort of takes me right into Ben, though. So Ben specializes in Google My Business, which obviously is integral to that. So Ben, maybe you could sort of just give us a brief summary how Google My Business could be used to foster finding new clients.
Sure, absolutely. So great to be here with all you guys, by the way. So yeah, I mean, basically, if you look at the number, right, the number is, I believe it's north of 60% of all all searches on Google and also on the phone, mobile as well, have some sort of local intent. That means that.
Go ahead. I just want you to describe what local intent is.
Oh, sure. Yeah. No, local intent, basically what that means is that, like Bill was saying, right? He's looking for something. He's using Google Maps. He's going down and he's driving, right? So that's one thing. Local intent, it definitely has to do with driving. But if I'm looking for, say, a personal injury lawyer, right, which I'm not, but if I'm looking for a personal injury lawyer, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go to Google and I'm going to say personal injury lawyer near me, or best personal injury lawyer near me, or I just got into an accident. Who can help? Something like that. Or I'm looking for, say, maybe I'm going out with a woman and I want to go see where a nice 5-star restaurant is nearby. So I'm going to see where's the best 5-star restaurant in downtown Phoenix. Those are local intent queries. And if you notice, most of them are actually very long form in intent, in nature. So they're not 2 to 3 words. They're actually more like phrases more than anything else. And so, with the local, Google's gotten very good at understanding what you want, when you want it, and then how to get you there. The how to get you there could be driving, it could be calling, it could be visiting the website, not so much, but it could be. And it could absolutely, basically, yeah, that's it.
Got it. So
there's a lot there.
So let's move back in the other direction, Bill. In terms of making your website play a part in this, how much of the Google Maps information should be on your website? How much of the social information should your website tightly integrate with social? What are the things that the website should be doing depending on the segment you're approaching? Let's say it's local in this case. What kind of things you're looking for on the website to maximize the value Google's going to provide you?
So one thing that Ben mentioned was a niche of lawyers. And I've been in a situation where I've received mail from a court. And I've seen words on the mail that I didn't understand. And going to law school, that's embarrassing. But I looked them up. And I've worked with lawyers to set the lawyers' their website up to rank well for those courts. So people search for the language on the letters from the courts, find the lawyer I worked with, look him up, hire him, and he works with them to get them out of court.
So content that's written for the user in a language the user understands. Is that what you're suggesting here?
Our language they don't understand that they're going to look up because the court sends that information out to them.
Got it. So be sure that the site has industry-specific references in great detail about the types of services they might want. So to Brian, I would ask, if your clients are local versus national, Facebook seems like a tough slog to me, but maybe I'm missing something there that you could help me and the rest of the people here understand. Given how Facebook tends to bury organic posts, I mean, do you lean towards advertising? Do you target that way? Do you have some other strategy to get surfaced in a local market on Facebook?
I mean, groups are always good for things like this. You just got to make sure that if you get into local business groups, not to pay attention to the ones that are more serious. Sometimes with some of these groups, they're spam fests. You want to see if you could find some groups to actually have conversations with. Again, sort of like the types of conversations that you can get on Alignable on LinkedIn. You want to be able to find something like that within Facebook in itself, because you're right. Facebook's organic reach is atrocious. I'm lucky myself with like the number of fans I have. If I get more than a couple of likes, and it's like if I get a comment on one of my posts, I'm like, oh my goodness, somebody commented on my post. But the main reason why I'm mainly keeping my Facebook stuff current and I post on it like almost nearly every day is because I want, if somebody shows up from say another link like my website, that I want them to see something current. It doesn't look good for someone to show up on a marketer's social media and it shows that the last time you post was 2019.
So in terms of
always-
local, sorry, go ahead. I didn't mean to
I was
interrupt
going to
you.
say, so I try to keep that current regardless, but in terms of local, I would look more towards groups. Or even this side of it, I have my own group, has about 75 people in it. Not all of them are local. They're local type businesses. They're all people that I know. There's a few people that are in my area. There's a bunch, most of the people are in my overall greater city area. I'm outside of Philadelphia. Some of them go as far afield as Florida, but they're also friends. But that's how I kind of keep it, is, like I said, looking at groups, having your own group.
I see. And just a quick question, this is probably a yes or no answer. Do you think boosting a post with good targeting helps exposure, or do you think advertising with good targeting is better in terms of trying to find a local clientele that might be interested in your service?
I mean, boosted posts are
Facebook.
Well, I think one of the things that a boosted post works well with is works well with content, because if you're taking more of a content marketing / funnel approach, getting them over to like boosting a post and then maybe getting someone over to your site to get more familiarity with you is a good idea. I mean, I don't know that I have a preference for either one, but I mean, I think they just take on their own importance depending on what you're doing. Like if you're sending someone to a specific offer, I think local advertising still has value on Facebook. But like I said, if you're trying to build the know, like, and trust factor, boosting a post is still a good idea, and it's pretty inexpensive.
So let me just make sure I got this. So at the highest level, if you're going to interact, you want to go into groups and be a member of the group, not be pitching your wares, just be there and be there to answer people's questions. And if a question comes up about your industry, you answer it. So it's kind of like going to the chamber meetup. Then if you've got a content strategy, you can use posts to boost it to get them into the funnel fairly high. They're not very well qualified. Or you could then target with some sort of offer to specifically try to get a lead. Did I summarize that correctly?
I was going to say, Mike, you did such a good job that I think you're going to communicate for me from now on.
Well, there you go. So, Bill, let's take a look at that from the website point of view. How would you, what type of funnel or process would you create for the website that would engender more leads coming to your business? And, is it content? Is it just calls to action? I mean, how would you deal with that on the website?
So I have done some blogging for small businesses. One of them was a law firm, and I was posting about legal information, but also about location information. I wanted to make sure people knew about the history of the place. So I would also, I was watching the news, and I was seeing what was happening in the courts in that date. And I would see new cases, and some of them were interesting. When somebody is an Elvis impersonator, and he's touring the country on an 18-wheeler, and he's in court in Delaware because the guy who owns the museum on the 18-wheeler with him decides to dissolve the corporation that owns it, and he goes to court and he needs an attorney. I wrote about the story, and the guy who the Elvis impersonator called us within a day, trying to hire us.
Interesting.
So very small target, but paying attention really makes a difference.
Right. So content is hard for a lot of small businesses, assuming that they can't generate original content like that. What would your suggestion be for website content?
I've seen people who specialize in certain fields like economics who would write stock market proposals and talk about economics in the area. And he had a newsletter he would send people out to, but he started posting that stuff on his website and his blog because he was getting lots of involvement from people, lots of responses and questions. Mm-hmm. And being able to answer questions and active in that type of field means that you can capture people who might be interested in what you do and want to work with you.
Got it. So let me address the same question to Ben. I mean, just let me preface this by saying in products and services, Google has become the 800-pound elephant in the room. My analysis is they're stopping people from getting to the website by scraping the website and providing so much information, whether you've claimed a business listing or not, in their business listing knowledge panel.
Yeah.
And they are converting people right there. In other words, I am seeing in the analytics I'm looking at somewhere between 70 and 90% of conversions are occurring on Google. Now, some people call this zero click, where people don't come to your website. The website's still very important to feed Google the information, but they're not getting to your website. So what do you do, given that, with GMB, Ben, to help you get discovered and find more clients?
All right, so let's talk about website and content first, and GMB and content, and then we'll talk about how do we get people to GMB or get people to the website. So you're right. I mean, we've been talking about this for now a couple of years about how Google's moving more towards, what is called, I call it sometimes zero-click search. But that's kind of always been Google's intent.
I don't. I call it high lead search, but
there you go, that too. But
right.
And we've seen some really aggressive moves. Since the pandemic hit, you've got the Google Shopping, you've got Pointy, which allows you to now bring your products directly into your Google My Business listing. We've heard rumors of car inventory, which I think is in beta. In coming into GMB. We've got the products and the services aspect of Google My Business. And so, and even you, I believe, tweeted out just the other day about how Burger King was allowing for really seamless ordering through Google. So again, more tests, but we can see how these things really make a lot of sense and keep you directly engaged on Google.com. The longer they keep you there, the better it is for them, and actually technically for you as a user. So,
I read some interesting stats the other day that 4 billion searches a month on Google are local, and 2 billion of those result in actions: click to call, driving directions, click to the website. So 2 billion actions, to half of them result in a user taking an action right then and there.
Exactly. The website, to go back to that really quickly, plays a pretty pivotal role actually with local search and Google My Business. And I believe it was 3 years ago when GMB queries first started getting surfaced into the performance report, insights back then, or anyway, into the stats of GMB, that did a little test. And that test is to put up some new content on the website, not to mention it anywhere else, don't get any links, don't do anything else for it, and see if basically and how long it would take to show up in those queries. And the answer was a week, basically. Google would crawl the site, find out that you were related to something that you just added to your site, and then it would start to show you and start actually surfacing you for those local queries. And how do we know the test was successful? Is that the GMB queries report is raw log files. It's all from the Google servers themselves. So it's telling you exactly how many people and exactly what keywords our people are using to trigger basically your knowledge panel. So the website is very important, even if people don't go to it. To Bill's point when he said, for instance, with getting a legal letter and then taking that legal terminology and putting that onto the website, that's an extremely important tactic right there. Because if that's user behavior, then you do need it on your website. And the chances of it triggering your local search is ever increased, actually.
So one of the things we all learned in the pandemic, that it's important for these businesses to actually focus, local businesses to focus locally, but also to look online and possibly look to national or regional audiences. So maybe each of you, starting with Brian, could address how you might successfully do that, sort of expand your reach beyond your immediate market into a more regional or national market using the tactics that you think would be most successful. So Brian, why don't you kick that off in terms of how you would do it to find new customers? In other words, a business kicked in the ass by COVID, realizes he's got to pivot a little bit, he's going to keep his retail store, but needs to now find new goods or services, how would you sort of go about that?
Well, I mean, if you're talking about a local brick and mortar business as opposed to like a consultant, like how I am, like as a consultant like I am, I could turn around and work with anybody anywhere. So, like that's one of the things that's great about social media and who you can meet. But with a local brick and mortar business, I've seen a lot of them go to to an e-commerce model be able to move their business. Because obviously, if a person doesn't have to meet you in person, they can just order. That's probably the best way of going about it. And then expanding into some sort of national SEO campaign. But I think part of the thing that has to be kept in mind too is the concept of, it's like basic marketing, getting into things like positioning and differentiation. You're not going to do a great job going up against Google, but if you can, again, going back to the ideal customer profile concept that I brought up earlier, if you identify who your niche market is, you identify a specific need in a specific position, you have much more, you're much more likely to be able to compete at a larger level. I mean, like if you're a local pet store, you might have a hard time, but going up against some of the big pet companies. But if you're like, okay, like I have a corgi, if you're doing pet store, if you're going for specific breeds, let's say you're doing a national campaign, meaning you're going for a specific niche, you might have an easier time.
So Ben, let me just go to you next. How would you make a transition? I think you talked about it a little bit at the beginning of your last little segment, just in terms of Shopify or Pointy and stuff, but how would you advise a business sort of make it? One of the things I've heard is that Google has said searches for products near me have expanded dramatically in the last little bit. So how does that relate, and how would you suggest they leverage the sort of Google My Business aspect to expand their reach?
Right.
I might want to refer that to Ben. I'm not so much an e-commerce specialist in that sort of manner. So that one, my specialization is more on the overall funnel and getting found. That one might be a better question for one of our other guys.
Sure. Just quick. Let me go back to that though. In your note, you said that you work with state and unadventurous industries. What is that? What kind of examples of that? What kind of industries would those be?
A good example, I'm working with a civil engineering company, new client of mine. Civil engineering is about as conservative as you can get.
So you make it sexy.
I make it sexier.
All right.
It's like another one of my clients who I did some really good branding work for and marketing work for, works in accounting. About as boring as you can get, but she's got more of an entrepreneurial mindset. So, and a really cool fractional outsourced accounting model. So I'm helping bring that to a wider audience, so she can, and also then be able to compete against the big guys.
So those are intrinsically local, but have a huge national opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
And so you're using social to sort of help them bridge that gap to try to find a bigger audience. And again, exactly. Okay, great. So Ben, maybe you could.
And getting into thought leadership. I'm sorry, I was going to say, and getting into things like thought leadership and content marketing, those things become kind of important for the personal brand of the people involved then becomes an important part of selling the business.
Got it. Okay. Yeah. So Ben, maybe you could answer that question from the local perspective, the GMB, the perhaps adding inventory, what level, who's ready for it, who's not, that kind of thing.
Yeah. Well, we talk about this, and I think COVID was really the catalyst, right? For Google, My Business, to be able to start looking towards how local businesses can take advantage of online. You and I were there, Mike, when COVID hit, and we were talking to GMB about this very topic. And it kind of goes back to some of the things that we were talking about, right? Number one, Brian, I agree. Building a persona is very important. But for a local business to kind of move into the online world, they need to get out. They need to do things that's just kind of good for marketing, like getting out and doing webinars and talking to people right outside of their area. But what we saw was, like for instance, I don't know, yoga studios is a good example. Yoga studios had to adapt because they couldn't allow nobody could come to the location. So they kept their location, but they started doing online appointments basically, or online scheduling. And you even have that option in GMB to put an online link for like classes that you do. So it's not really a local business anymore. It's more, it's like, who can I serve? So they had to make that kind of adaptation. And, like we were talking about with Pointy, which is bringing products directly into Google My Business. And then we were talking about the auto.
Let me just give users a definition of Pointy. Pointy is a product that Google bought that sits between your POS and your scanner, and it automatically catalogs the products you're selling, uploads them to a web page in the cloud, and feeds that information into Google Product Merchant Center. So Google now knows what products you carry locally. So if somebody does that search, this product near me, it shows up. And it's really perfect for the business that hasn't quite made the jump to full-on Shopify, full-on WooCommerce kind of thing, right?
Yeah,
Sorry,
absolutely. No, absolutely. I mean, and it bypasses that. It bypasses that hurdle. It reduces the friction of having to set up a Shopify or an e-commerce website. Like you said, it's right there between the point of sale. So bringing that inventory in real time. Go to a Walmart, look up Walmart on search, and you'll be able to see it in action, for instance. So there's that, and we talked a little bit about how they're doing it for auto dealerships. They've been doing it, of course, with restaurants for ages. And I think really that Google learned all of this from the hotel industry, just if you want to take it all the way back, looking at real-time inventory and bringing that to the web. So yeah, but I mean, beyond
bringing
that,
it to the web locally. In other words, real-time inventory in a local market.
Exactly.
Whether it's food, whether it's products. I mean, one of the big trends at Google is this move towards increased sub-entity understanding. By that I mean understanding not just the business, but understanding all the things the business services they provide or all the products they carry, and then being able to offer those up in a local context. So if you're searching for a Nikon D whatever, Google will say this is now available locally to your search, right?
And I think to GMB and Google's credit, they're seeing that local businesses need to act more nationally. And that's probably reflected in Google Trends and Google Search, meaning that I might be in Phoenix, Arizona. However, I might be moving to California, and I might want to go find something in California before I even get there. So I might do a localized search. There's still local intent, but I'm in a whole nother state. So, again, that might work with a whole bunch of things. But yeah, so just to wrap all that up, historically, it's been very difficult for a local business to have a much larger presence outside of the locality. Now it's getting a little bit easier, and I think we can only expect to see it expand.
All right. Bill, let me ask you, take this in a different direction. In digital marketing, we talk about KPIs, key performance indicators, things that measure success. And the problem that I see with a lot of businesses that I deal with is they're overwhelmed by Google Analytics, overwhelmed by Site Manager, overwhelmed by even the GMB data that Google tries to make easily available. So when you're working with businesses, how do you help them identify those digital aspects that are key indicators of successful performance, and how do you measure them?
I've been fortunate to work with some business owners who've been heavily involved in things like chambers of commerce, and they recognize when they're working with somebody who is helping drive more business to their sites. And if their website doesn't have a clear expression of how they treat customers, how customers contact them, how everything works together, they need that. And working with the client, when I point out they need to rewrite their pages to make them clearer, to make it easier for people to become their customers. And they do it, and they're return on investment goes up 57% because of it.
So let's dig into return on investment. How do you measure whether what you've done is successful?
Okay, so I'm working with a limo driver, and the limo driver doesn't tell you how to rent a limo and how to have a personal holiday and take it out and go places. And we provide examples of showing that type of thing to customers on their website, and they include those on their pages. If you've got kids renting a limo to go to the prom, you show a picture of a young boy and young girl standing together holding hands, that's fine, but show a picture of the same young guy and young girl getting into a limo going to the prom.
Right.
Give them examples.
All right. So, Brian, let me address this question to you for social. I look at analytics in Facebook, and there's impressions and thumbs up and, all of these things. What are the metrics that a business should be looking at to see if the social campaign is being successful? Where do they measure it? How do they measure it? What's important to them?
What I actually do is I follow what's called a customer journey map. And the customer journey map is an 8-step process. It's actually created by digitalmarketer.com. Anybody who wants to find out more about that, just go look up their website. I'm not an affiliate or anything. I'm actually a student there. And at each step of this 8-step journey, you can kind of derive the KPIs that come from it. Like the first step is awareness. Then the second step is engagement. The third step is subscription. You can take a look at these things and go, well, what's appropriately going to measure this? Now, I mean, for social, you might be able to break down at the awareness stage things like your number of followers that you have. You might be able to look at like what your engagement is on the back end metrics. But generally speaking, at that stage, you want to be able to figure out like what does eyes on your ads, what do eyes on your content, what do your click-throughs look like to your actual content that you're trying to get people to look at. Then you're going to start looking at stuff like what is your subscription metrics look like. Things like, and because the reason this is important is because people tend to focus just generally on like, okay, what is their ROI on this? But how do you debug ROI? You debug ROI by going, what step in my process, and those 8 steps or the 3 or 4 steps that come before even a basic purchase, how do you debug those? You turn around and go, well, there's a bottleneck here. It's like, nobody's seeing my content. It's like my views on my ad or my views on my social posts or something like that are way down, or maybe they're decent, but the click through over to it's, for lack of a better word, stinks. So maybe then things like your calls to action need to get better. Maybe your content needs to get better. So what I would say is really kind of map out what are the stages of what you're doing, and then be able to assign a KPI that's appropriate based upon those stages.
Got it. And so, Ben, take this from a local point of view.
Sure.
Same question.
Yeah,
what are critical key performance indicators to measure, and how do you know if you're having success?
Absolutely. And actually with local, it's super easy. Let's start out with a stat really quick. So, and why I say it's easy is that 90% on average, 90% of the business that a local business gets is coming from Google My Business. We see that, and how I know that is because of the thousands of reinstatements I've done. Pretty much when somebody gets suspended and removed from Google Maps, they're almost out of business. They're letting people go usually within a couple days. So, and we also hear that from our clients in general. Okay, so on to how do we track these components into KPIs. When it comes to Google My Business, there's a lot of things that you can do. Number one, the first thing is that when you're talking about any kind of link, whether it be an appointment link or a website link, you're going to use UTM tracking parameters. It's very easy to do. And then if you're using Google Analytics, you can start slicing and dicing your data and saying, okay, well, these people came from Google My Business, these people came and read my blog, or they did whatever actions it is, these people ordered, etc. And so that's great, right? Okay, so now we got the website piece. What about the phone piece? With the phone piece, a little bit more important, because the number is right there on your GMB listing. On mobile, somebody clicks on that, boom, you know somebody clicked on your phone number. Great, fantastic. That's all you know, by the way. If they're on desktop, user behavior is not to click a link and then have it go over to their cell phone. User behavior is pick up my cell phone, I'm going to go ahead and just dial the number. So a little bit more friction, but that's user behavior. So how do you get around losing basically 60% of your data? And you get around that by just putting in a call tracking number, whether it be from CallRail or call tracking metrics or whatever company you choose to use. Your call tracking is going to tell you how many people called, the average number of calls. They can even segment it actually into leads and all sorts of things and automatically tag everything. So it's not just good for GMB, it's actually good for your business and all the advertising that you're doing. I encourage having a tracking number for ads, for your website, for GMB specifically, citations, etc. So you've got that. And then, ultimately you do have the metrics which Google gives you, which is like insight data. How many people called, which is off. How many driving directions, also off. Views and things like that. So they're good benchmarks. They're not perfect, however. And the last KPI that I really encourage you to use is take a look at the number of reviews that you're getting. That's actually a KPI. Because if you send out 100 links to somebody to leave you a review and you only get 2, well, that's a 2% return. Not good, but if you can improve it and make it 4 or even 10% next month, now you have a KPI you can chase. And then there's clicks to the website. So anyway, yeah.
So there's a lot of things here. Let me just summarize this. And then the last question is going to be, and I want you to think about it, top 3 things a business needs to get right in each of your domains. So think about that while I'm summarizing this. So I think you need to, from a business point of view, you need to start with the end of the process. What is a success in the digital world? How does that translate to success for you? If you're e-commerce, it means a sale. But if you're a bricks and mortar, it may mean a driving direction. It may mean a phone call if you're a lawyer. So first thing you want to do is define what success is. And then per Ben, put in place appropriate tracking to be sure that you can measure that accurately. Might be driving directions, might be phone calls, might be something else. Wherever people are coming from, your website, Google My Business, wherever. Bill's point is that you want to be sure that you actually have the content they're looking for to convert on your website. So if they make it to your website, you're answering their questions. And then Brian's was that it really depends on the social context, where they're trying to get to, where they're going, what you're going to want to measure, and that you're going to need to fix some of the things above as you move up from this specific digital measurement as you move up. In other words, from interest to attention to conversion, as you move up that sort of buyer's funnel, you may have to put in place more sophisticated metrics so that you can see if you're doing a good job. Over the basic, did I get more calls this month than last month? Did I get more appointments on my appointment scheduler, et cetera? So start by figuring out what it is you want people to do, and then work your way back through this process, ultimately to Brian's more complicated process, but initially just measuring that which is important. So 3 top things a business needs to do to get right. Let me just start with Bill. In terms of a website, 3 top things you'd tell people.
In an ideal world, the people who handle customer service and sales questions from your audience members are the people your SEO should be interviewing to see what gets put on your website, see what problems people have, to see what information they're most interested in. One of the first things I turned over to my first SEO client was a notepad to put next to his phone so he could write down all the questions that he got, so we could make sure the answers were on the website, because there were things people wanted to know about. And in most cases, he agreed to put those on there, and business shot up because of it. because we had the information they wanted to find. We knew what they were interested in asking about. And he preferred not to send them long emails answering those questions anyway. So if the website did it, he didn't have to.
Great. Brian, top 3 things you'd suggest from a social point of view.
Picking up on the first question, I really have three things that I make sure that somebody's got to be able to answer. Is number one, who do you serve? Then from there, what value you're delivering to those target customers, and how do you articulate it? And then how do you create a system that will acquire customers predictably and profitably? Those are the 3 things that most businesses have to, all businesses really have to be able to answer.
And Ben, to you.
Okay. So just to put a little bit of a bow on this, it's a lot of what we've been talking about, right? First thing I'm going to say is let's just work backwards. Tracking. You can't, how's the saying go? You can't measure what you're not tracking, right? So make sure you've got that right. For GMB, category. Category is probably one of the most important things that you can optimize. You can use tools like GMB Spy or Plepper to go see what your competitors are using for categories. But I've seen a lawyer before who literally, when they set up their GMB, they set it as lawyer, not criminal defense lawyer, not employment lawyer, not personal injury lawyer, just lawyer. Changed it to personal injury lawyer, leads shot up 200%. So that's 2, 3 leads versus 1. Anyway.
That's still.
Just kidding. And the last thing is going to come down to content. Content is king. I don't care what anybody says, whether it's on your website or on Google My Business. And kind of like to Bill's last point here about for instance, just like something as simple as a frequently asked question. If you can, one of the things that you can do to motivate yourself to make this content is that if you're creating like an FAQ, you could put it on your website. Yes, excellent. You can put it on Google My Business in the form of questions and answers. You can make a blog post. You can make a Google My Business post about that blog post. So all of these little things, they're all content, and Google's reading all of this information and figuring out how to service you based on this information. So invest in it.
All right. So we got a couple questions in. This is from Lisa. You answered it, Ben, but I'm going to address it in case other people had the same question. Are you saying point me or pointing? It's pointy, P-O-I-N-T-Y. And Google announced this past week that on their blog.google.com that you can now get this device for free, assuming you have a qualified POS and scanner that works with their hardware. So go to blog.google.com and look for Pointy. You'll find information on that. And this last question was, how do I get found more often? He said organically, but he means outside of Google Ads as a service provider versus selling a product on GMB. So how do I get found more often as a service provider?
I'll go with that one.
All right, sure.
Yeah.
And leave some space here. We're into the last 5 minutes, so don't take
I'll make it real quick.
Right.
So how do you do it? Number one, service provider. Yes, of course you can have a GMB, but really, I know you said organically, but I'm going to actually.
Well, he meant locally. He meant a service provider versus selling a product on GMB.
Got it.
So he means locally.
I would actually work with something else, which is another Google product. It's similar to GMB, and it's called Local Service Ads. Local Service Ads allows you to.
You said outside of Google Ads. That was a parameter here.
Local Service Ads. It's different.
It is different, but we're talking trying to get you back on track here. Outside of Google Ads. He doesn't want to pay.
If you don't want to pay anything and you're just going for free, then yeah, I mean, pretty much it's your website and it's going to be making sure that GMB is properly all filled out, your categories are in place, getting reviews, all the good holistic things.
I would summarize it really quickly as having relevant content on your website, very specific to the services you provide, each page having its own. Secondly, I would go with reviews at Google and every place else that your customers are looking at. And then I would go with a good category and a good business name at Google. And then finally, I would work towards building a presence for your digital brand by link building and articles so that your website ranks higher, which will help your GMB rank higher. That would be a quick summary. So to answer your question, Paul, and thank you for it. So each of you gets about a minute to summarize your most deepest philosophical thoughts about how to find more customers in 1 minute. Bill, start.
Great. Find good evangelists. Find people who say nice things about you. It's easy to do. It's possible. You can begin by looking at existing customers, vendors, people that you know, people that you've been working with for years. I helped set up a law firm, and the first person we talked to was an accountant who the attorney talked to and did business with on a regular basis. And the accountant had a testimonial for him, which was a nice way to start.
Right. So word of mouth, whether directly, person to person, or digitally through a third-party site. Word of mouth.
Right. You all work with people.
Right.
Talk to them. You've built relationships. Take advantage of it.
All right. And Ben, how about you? One takeaway, high
1 minute.
philosophical thinking, spill your guts, last chance.
All right. Look, marketing has not changed. Marketing, and I'll say it again, marketing has not changed. It was the same way in the 1900s as it is today. If you think about it in that kind of terminology, just the how we do things has changed. So as a business, you are here to really solve one thing. You are to give a solution to a problem. When somebody's searching online, they're looking for a solution. When somebody gives a referral to somebody, that's because they've asked for a solution. When they come to you finally, you're providing them with a solution. So keep that in mind. And if you look at that and you also understand that Google is trying to assemble all this information to give a solution to one individual, then that can help you dictate how you drive your marketing, whether that be with content, social media, GMB, it doesn't really matter. Provide a solution.
And to you, Brian, for a final pearl of wisdom.
Marketing mostly comes down to the questions that Seth Godin puts forward in one of his latest books, which is who's it for and what's it for? You know, it's like, who's your audience? What's the value that's provided? And as I put earlier, where can you find them? Where are they congregating? That's how that generally speaking is how you best use things like advertising and social media.
I think we are going to get a notice from Heather telling us where to go next for a follow-up conversation. Looks like we have 1 minute. I gave her a little bit, 60 seconds. She only needed 30.
You're great. Thank you so much. All right, well, thank you all for attending this session of Small Biz Aid Live. To continue the conversation, please join the Marketing for Small Business or the SEO for Small Business Alignable Small Business Groups at the links provided in the event chat. Recordings of each session will be available within 48 hours. Links to each recorded session will be provided on our event page within the agenda. Thank you again for all of you presenters. You did a wonderful job. Have a great day. If attendees, you want to stay on for the next session, and I highly recommend it, please stay here and we will start the next session shortly. Thanks so much.